Beset by injuries that triggered the loss of key players Jasprit Bumrah, Ravi Ashwin and Ravi Jadeja for the fourth and final test against Australia, touring India had to work hard on the opening day in Brisbane, and despite making a good start to have the Aussies rocking at 17 for 2 and then 87 for 3 after they elected to bat, the home team reached 274 for 5 at stumps. This series, of course, showing live on SportsMax. Donald Oliver has a day one story.
Nobody can deny the majestic nature of the cricket we have seen in this series. And after Australia won the toss and elected to bat in the fourth and deciding test, we saw a bit more. The ball to dismiss David Warner was a thing of beauty from Mohammed Siraj at the end of the first over.
I have a habit of doing that.
Edge, is it taken? It is! Brilliant catch, Rohit Sharma diving low to his right. And Warner goes early again. What a breakthrough.
And it was 17 for 2 when Marcus Harris guided this one just forward of square on the onside. Shardul Thakur with his first test wicket. A long time coming after he was injured during his first test against West Indies in October of 2018. Steve Smith joined Marnus Labuschagne, who looked magnificent at times. And Smith, well, he was Steve Smith.
Shot through the field.
Until he wasn't. The debutant, Washington Sundar, got him.
Got him! Sundar breaks through!
Labuschagne was given a chance after Navdeep Saini bowled a brute of a delivery. Skipper Ajinkya Rahane couldn't hold on.
Catching height.
And that was Saini's last ball as he suffered a groin strain. Labuschagne got another chance, this time a more difficult opportunity for Cheteshwar Pujara. The other debutant, Thangarasu Natarajan, had to wait to get his first. But Labuschagne rode his luck to get to his half-century.
That'll be his 50, Marnus Labuschagne. Good single.
And he grew in confidence with some classical drives through the offside. Matthew Wade showed a glimpse of his class in this fourth wicket stand worth 113 runs. But Labuschagne was the man of the moment.
Shot. Gets it through the gap. He's threatened to do it in the last couple of innings. But now he gets to three figures. Another test century on his home ground. And his fifth ton in 18 test matches.
Wade didn't get to reach his half-century as Natarajan got his first test wicket.
Nearly a collision.
And the Indian bowler would also pick up Labuschagne for 108.
One up in the air. Team Natarajan.
But that was the last bit of joy for the Indians on day one, as Cameron Green and skipper Tim Payne avoided drama in their unbeaten sixth wicket stand of 61.
So 274 for 5 at stumps. Day 2 action starts on SportsMax at 8 o'clock Eastern Caribbean time, 7 o'clock in Jamaica. Reviewing day 1 now with us, Fazeer Mohammed, international cricket commentator based in TNT. Faz, a quick question here. Where are all these Indian cricketers coming from? I know that the T20 game is far removed in structure from Test cricket, but it does seem that the IPL has caused in the past decade such a proliferation of cricket and cricketers in India that some of these IPL men are coming into the white suit and the red ball and acquitting themselves well.
Absolutely, Lance. You know, it's really phenomenal to see how these players have risen to the challenge, because as we pointed out many times during the course of the series, look at the players who are out. Virat Kohli, Hanuma Vihari, Ravi Ashwin, Umesh Yadav, Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Shami, Ravi Jadeja. You also had the two Sharmas, Rohit Sharma, who missed the first 2 test matches,
yes.
Ishan Sharma, who couldn't even make the trip. And still they're competitive, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so kudos to them. And not so good in the field, though, Faz, because if they were a little sharper with catching on day 1, the Aussies could have been in a lot worse position than they are now.
Absolutely. That drop by Rahane certainly proved very expensive. The one to Bajara, much more difficult. But you take it as it goes, because if you go to the last day of the Sydney test and Australia had held their chances, they would have been 2-1 up going into this test match. So it's something that you try not to linger too much on, because they're going to have to bat and really bat well to ensure that they remain in a competitive position in this deciding test.
Yeah, we have spoken a lot too when we compare some of these top flight countries in international cricket to the West Indies situation, and the fact that their own domestic games are propelling them to, you know, good standing in international cricket. Because we just spoke about India, but you know, to be quite honest, 3 or 4 years ago we didn't know much about Labuschagne, and now we're seeing players like Green and Pukovsky servicing for the Aussies and looking to have the potential to be real world-class players.
And that is the continuing concern, because you talk about strength and depth. We always talked about the time when the West Indies were dominant, about what was known then as the Shell Shield, that it was the equivalent of Test cricket when the likes of Barbados were playing the Combine Islands or Jamaica taking on Guyana. It's so far from that now that it's reflected in the reality of the situation. And yes, it's an extremely competitive environment with these two nations. Many will say it's about time that India, a country of 1 billion plus people, the majority of them absolutely crazy about the game, reach the level that they are showing now. Because again, to be 1-1 against Australia in their backyards with all the injuries that they've suffered, and as you said correctly, you mentioned those Australian players, it is about strength and depth that talks about their domestic competition.
Fazeer, I'm looking at the India lineup, just man for man, and their role in the team. And I'm a bit concerned, because I'm thinking, if the Aussies, and it's a big if because half of the team is already out and runs are on the tins, but not many. But what was the total you think Australia would be comfortable with in the first innings, given that the Indian batting lineup, Fazeer, the tail is rather long. The tail is 5 players long, starting with the new all-rounder Washington Sundar and then 4 specialist bowlers after that. So a tail 5 notches long, 350 runs on the board, that could challenge this already hard-up India team, I suggest.
Yeah, well, you preempted me, because I was going to suggest 350 as well. And I would think that because of that potential vulnerability, that is something that they'll set as an absolute minimum going into the second day's play in just a few minutes' time. But I wouldn't discount India at all, because, again, they've shown a level of fight. Yes, they've had so many lapses in the field that have proved costly. But even on the last day in Sydney, again, you thought that they would fold and Australia would rush through. It didn't happen. And even with so many players missing, even with the likes of Saini, Siraj, Natarajan, Thakur and Sundar, players with about 3 or 4 test matches among all of them, and yet still they were able to put up that bit of a fight. So I would expect them to continue in that vein, but obviously Australia would be the favourites, as you said correctly, when you matched up man for man, but then we'll have to see what the Indians are made of this time around.
And hear this now, correct me if I'm wrong, Australia haven't lost a test at the Gabba since when, 1988? It's been a long, right, that was in the hell of a long time ago. But the teams that have made that record what it is have been some of the outstanding teams in world cricket. Nobody would even venture to say that this Australia vintage is anywhere near some of the Australian teams in the past that have helped to set that record. Isn't it realistic that even after one day's play, and based on what we've seen from a gutsy India team and an Australia team that isn't as awesome as others have been, that record is very, very vulnerable right now?
It could be, although I'd say the balance of power still rests with Australia. And let's remember as well, when we always try to put things in context, when India won that series 2 years ago in Australia, they insisted that they were not going to play in Brisbane. And now we have this series finishing in Brisbane, whereas previously it would start in Brisbane. So that shows you the power of India off the field as well. But having said all of that, you take nothing away from them for the quality of their cricketers. As Lance said, just emerging out of nowhere, the same way that West Indies players would have emerged out of nowhere every 5 minutes to dominate the game. You see Indians, even if they may not be dominating, that they're ready to put up a fight. And I think that is the most impressive element of this Indian team.
Finally, Fazeer, a man went to bed, and when he woke up, Manchester United were top of the English Premier League and Liverpool second. Those two teams meet at Anfield on Sunday. I want to hear your assessment of what awaits us all.
Well, clearly Lance hasn't told you the story. Let him tell you that story, and then you'll come back with a different perspective. Because to cut a long story short, I am attempting, with great difficulty, to disentangle myself from my support of Liverpool. So I won't even be watching the game come Sunday.
What?
Talk to Lance.
All right, Fazeer, no problem. We'll take that. But guess what? No matter what you do, I'll still have a dig or two about you and Liverpool. Fret not. It's just what it is.
It would not be you if you didn't.
Have a good weekend, my friend. All the best to you.
All the best. And just a reminder, provocation is a good excuse.
There you go, sir. There you go, sir. Fazeer Mohammed over there in Trinidad and Tobago taking us to this break.